September 2001, Amanda Park, Washington. A man walked into a motel 3 days after 9/11, paid cash, and hanged himself in room 5. But when police checked every database in America, he didn't exist anywhere. For 17 years, nobody on earth knew his name, and his own family believed he was still alive. What made a 25-year-old man erase himself so completely that even his fingerprints couldn't tell investigators who he was? Amanda Park, Washington sits on the edge of nowhere. Highway 101 cuts through this forgotten logging town like a scar. Fewer than 200 people live here. Most travelers pass right through without stopping. The trees tower over everything, thick and dark, blocking out the sun even at noon. The air smells like wet moss and old wood. In September, the rain comes down in sheets that turn the world gray and cold. The Lake Quinault Inn stands on the highway, a simple roadside motel built back in the 1960s. 6 rooms line up in the main building. 2 more sit in a small building out back. The paint peels from the walls. The neon sign flickers at night. Truckers stop here sometimes. Fishermen. People with nowhere else to go. The woman who runs the front desk goes by Aunt Barb. She knows most guests by face after all these years working here. She can tell when someone is just passing through and when someone is running from something. Friday, September 14th, 2001. The whole country was still shaking. 3 days earlier, planes had crashed into the Twin Towers in New York City. The Pentagon in Washington burned. Another plane went down in a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people died. Every television showed the same images over and over. The towers falling, people running through streets covered in ash. America felt like it had broken open. That afternoon, a young man stepped off a bus somewhere near Amanda Park. Maybe he came from Port Angeles to the north, maybe from Aberdeen to the south. Nobody saw him arrive. He appeared at the motel door like a ghost. Aunt Barb looked up from her desk when he walked in. He was tall, about 6 feet, but thin. Too thin. She guessed he weighed maybe 130 pounds, perhaps 140 at most. His black hair was combed back neat and careful. His eyes were hazel, somewhere between green and brown. When he smiled, his teeth looked perfect and white. Someone had taken good care of this young man once. He wore clothes that hung loose on his body, like they belonged to someone much bigger. The shirt sleeves bunched at his wrists, the pants pooled around his shoes. He carried nothing with him. No suitcase, no backpack, no bag at all. Just a toothbrush and a small tube of toothpaste in his pocket. At the front desk, he picked up a pen. His handwriting was neat and careful. He wrote down a name, Lyle Stevick. Under that, an address, 1019 South Progress Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. Aunt Barb noticed something, about the way he spoke. His voice sounded different. Not quite American. Maybe Canadian, she thought. Something in the way he shaped his words. He pulled out $60 in cash and laid it on the counter. He said he wanted to stay one night, maybe a few more after that. He would let her know. He asked for room 5 specifically. Aunt Barb gave him the key. Later that day, he came back to the desk. He complained about noise. Could he move to a different room? Aunt Barb switched him without asking questions. Over the next 2 days, people saw him walking along the highway near the motel, back and forth, back and forth, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his head down. He walked like someone trying to make a decision, like someone running through the same thought over and over in his mind. Sunday, September 16th. The best guess is he died that day. Nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything. The motel stayed quiet. Monday morning, September 17th. The maid knocked on his door at checkout time. 10:30 in the morning. No answer. She knocked again. Nothing. She used her key and pushed the door open. The room was dark. All the blinds were closed tight. The bedspread had been pulled completely off the bed and hung over the window like a curtain. Not a single crack of light came through. The maid's eyes needed a moment to adjust. Then she saw him. He hung from the coat rack by a leather belt. His body swayed slightly in the air from the door opening. The belt was wrapped around his neck. His feet dangled inches above the floor. His face had turned a dark purple color. His eyes were open, but saw nothing. The maid screamed and ran. The police arrived within 20 minutes. They cut him down carefully. His body was cold and stiff. He had been dead for hours, maybe a full day. On the nightstand, they found $160 in $20 bills. 8 crisp bills laid out in a neat stack. Next to the money sat a handwritten note. It said, "For the room." In the small trash can by the bed, officers found a piece of paper. Someone had written one word on it in the same neat handwriting from the registration card. The word was suicide. They searched the room top to bottom. No wallet, no identification card, no driver's license, no credit cards, no phone, no address book, nothing with a name on it except that registration card at the front desk. Just the toothbrush and toothpaste. Just the clothes on his body that were too big for him. Just those 8 $20 bills and 2 notes. The police looked closer at how he died. The coat rack he used was low, barely 5 feet off the ground. To hang himself from it, he would have had to bend his knees and hold that position. His body would have fought him. His legs would have wanted to straighten. His hands would have wanted to grab the belt and pull it loose. But he didn't. He held that bent position until his brain ran out of oxygen and everything went black. The officers noticed something else strange. He had taken pillows from the bed and jammed them between his body and the walls on both sides. Like he was building a barrier. Maybe he knew his body would thrash and struggle. Maybe he wanted to muffle any sounds he might make. Maybe he didn't want anyone in the next room to hear him die. The coroner came to examine the body. His name was Lane Humans. He used to be a police detective before he became a coroner. He had seen hundreds of deaths, car accidents, murders, heart attacks, suicides. But something about this one felt different from the moment he walked into that dark room. He took photographs of everything. The body, the belt, the pillows, the money, the notes, every detail. The autopsy happened the next day. The young man appeared healthy, no signs of cancer, no tumors, no heart disease. His organs looked normal. His blood showed no drugs, no alcohol, nothing that would explain why he wanted to die. But his hands told a different story. Small injuries on his knuckles and fingers. The kind of damage that comes from forcing yourself to throw up over and over. Bulimia, the doctors called it. He had been starving himself. His clothes were about 40 pounds too big. He must have lost that much weight recently. They found other things during the examination. A small mole on his chin. His earlobes were fused to the sides of his head instead of hanging loose. A scar on his abdomen from an appendix surgery. The scar looked about a year old, maybe less. And those perfect teeth. Someone had paid for dental work. Fillings, cleanings, years of care. The police ran his fingerprints through the FBI database. Every person arrested in America has their fingerprints on file. Every government employee. Every person who ever applied for certain jobs. Millions and millions of fingerprints stored in computers. They searched for hours, then days. Nothing matched. They sent the prints to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada, thinking maybe he was Canadian, like Aunt Barb suggested. Still nothing. They tried the address he wrote down, 1019 South Progress Avenue in Meridian, Idaho. It was a Best Western hotel more than 600 miles away. The police called and sent the man's photograph. The manager looked at it carefully. She had worked there for 6 years. She did not recognize him. He had never stayed there as far as she knew. The name bothered them too. Lyle Stevick. It sounded real enough. But when they searched for it, something strange came up. Lyle Stevick was a character in a book. A novel called You Must Remember This, written by Joyce Carol Oates back in 1987. In that book, Lyle Stevick tries to kill himself. The man in room 5 had chosen the name of a character who attempts suicide. He had given them a fake name, a fake address, no identification, no way to trace him. And despite every database in America, despite fingerprints and dental records and DNA, despite photographs sent to police departments across the country, nobody could tell them who this man really was. It was like he had never existed at all. Like he was a ghost who appeared in Amanda Park just long enough to die and then vanished back into nothing. Lane Humans stood in that motel room long after the body was removed. He looked at the closed blinds, the bedspread still hanging over the window, the pillows on the floor. He thought about the planning this took, the money left behind, the note apologizing for the room. This was not a sudden decision. This was not someone who snapped in a moment of pain. This man had thought about every detail. He wanted to disappear completely, and he almost succeeded. The case file landed on a desk somewhere and gathered dust. Suicide, unknown identity, no leads, cold case. But the questions remained, hanging in the air like that body hung from the coat rack. Who was he? Where did he come from? And why did he work so hard to make sure nobody would ever know? The investigation started the way all investigations start, with what they could see and touch and measure. Lane Humans went back to that motel room again and again. He measured distances. He took more photographs. He wrote down every tiny detail in his notebook. The room was 12 feet wide and 15 feet long. The coat rack stood exactly 4 feet 11 inches from the floor. The belt was 36 inches long. Brown leather, well worn, the kind you could buy at any store in America. The position of the body haunted Humans. He tried it himself one day when nobody was watching. Stood under that coat rack and bent his knees like the young man must have done. His legs started shaking after just 30 seconds. The muscles burned. Every part of his body screamed at him to stand up straight, to save himself. But Lyle Stevick had held that position until he lost consciousness, until his brain shut down from lack of oxygen. That took real determination. That took a kind of will that most people do not have. The clothes bothered investigators too. The shirt was size extra large. The pants had a 36-inch waist. But the autopsy measured Lyle at about 135 pounds. Those clothes belonged to someone who weighed at least 175 pounds. Maybe more. The injuries on his hands from bulimia told the story. He had been forcing himself to throw up, starving himself, losing weight fast. 40 pounds in what? A few months? Maybe less? His body was eating itself. The appendix scar gave them hope at first. Someone had performed surgery on this man within the past year. Hospitals keep records. They could search for patients who had their appendix removed. They could match it to his age and description. But which hospital? Which state? Which doctor? America has thousands of hospitals, millions of patients. Without a name or a city to start with, the search was impossible. The dental work offered another path. His teeth were too perfect to belong to someone without money. Multiple fillings, professional cleanings, years of orthodontic care. Somewhere a dentist had records of those teeth. X-rays, charts, notes. But again, which dentist? Which city? Without more information, they were searching for a grain of sand on a beach that stretched from coast to coast. DNA went into the national database called CODIS. The system holds DNA from criminals, missing persons, and unidentified bodies. Computers search through millions of samples looking for matches. Parents of missing children submit their DNA hoping for answers. Police departments upload DNA from crime scenes. But Lyle Stevick's DNA matched nothing. Nobody in the entire system shared his genetic code. The Quinault Indian Nation helped search their community. Amanda Park sits on their land. Maybe he was tribal. Maybe someone would recognize him. They passed around his photograph at tribal meetings, posted it in community centers, asked the elders. Nobody knew him. He was not one of theirs. The police canvassed the town, all 196 people who lived there. Did anyone see this man before he checked into the motel? Did anyone talk to him, give him a ride, sell him food? Everyone said no. He appeared like smoke and disappeared just as fast. Missing person reports came in from across the country. Parents who had not heard from their sons. Wives who said their husbands left and never came back. Each report needed to be checked, each photograph compared, each description measured against what they knew. Height, weight, hair color, eye color, scars, dental work. Over the next few years, investigators would rule out 221 different missing persons, 221 families who hoped this might be their lost loved one. 221 times the answer was no. The handwriting on the registration card became evidence. Handwriting experts studied the neat, careful letters, the way he made his capital L, the curve of his S. They could tell things about a person from how they write, education level, personality, whether they were rushed or calm. Lyle Stevick's handwriting showed control, precision, someone who thought before they acted, but it did not tell them his name. The note in the trash haunted everyone who saw it. One word: suicide. Why write that down? Why throw it away? Some investigators thought maybe he had written a longer letter. Maybe he told his family what he planned to do. Maybe he asked them not to look for him. Maybe that single word was all that remained after he tore up the rest. But they would never know for sure. Theories started forming. Maybe he was running from the law. Maybe he committed a crime and wanted to disappear. But his fingerprints were not in any criminal database. He had never been arrested, never been charged, never spent a day in jail, as far as anyone could tell. Maybe he was in witness protection. The government sometimes gives people new identities to keep them safe. New names, new histories. But the FBI said no, he was not one of theirs. Maybe he was homeless. Maybe he had been living on the streets for years and nobody ever took his fingerprints or his DNA. But his teeth were too good, his clothes too clean despite being too large. Someone had cared for this man once. The Canadian angle kept coming up. Aunt Barb swore he sounded Canadian. The way he said certain words, the melody of his speech. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police had his prints and his DNA. But Canada is huge, millions of people. And if he never got in trouble with the law, never went missing officially, there would be no record of him there either. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The case went cold. The file went into a cabinet somewhere in the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office. Other cases demanded attention. Other bodies needed investigating. Lyle Stevick became just another unknown, just another person who slipped through the cracks. But Lane Humans could not let it go. He had worked on hundreds of suicides during his career, people who jumped off bridges, people who shot themselves, people who took pills. He understood suicide. He understood the pain that drives someone to end their own life. But this was different. This felt wrong in a way he could not explain. The planning, the fake name from a book, the money left for the room, the word suicide written down like a confession. In 2007, 6 years after Lyle died, Humans did something unusual. He posted about the case on a website called Web Sleuths. Regular people use this site to discuss unsolved mysteries, missing persons, cold cases, murder investigations. Thousands of amateur detectives spending their free time trying to solve what police could not. Humans wrote about Lyle Stevick. He shared photographs. He described the scene. He ended his post with words that would echo for years. This assignment was different. This case was utterly bizarre. The internet grabbed hold of the mystery. People across the country became obsessed with the man in room 5. They created spreadsheets of every detail. They built timelines. They compared him to missing person reports from every state. They analyzed his handwriting. They measured the shadows in photographs to figure out the exact time they were taken. Artists created facial reconstructions. Diana Trepkov drew his face from different angles. Carl Koppelman used computer software to age his image backward. What did Lyle look like at age 15? At age 10? David Manos Morris painted him in different hairstyles and clothing. Maybe someone would recognize him from years earlier. Maybe a childhood friend, a teacher, a neighbor. Facebook groups formed dedicated to finding his identity. Hundreds of people joined, then thousands. They shared theories. They argued about details. Some thought he was from California. Others said Texas. Some insisted he was Canadian. The debates went hours and days and years. Someone suggested he might have traveled through the southern United States as a teenager. Maybe he worked odd jobs. Maybe he hitchhiked. Maybe someone remembered him from a diner in Arizona or a gas station in New Mexico. But these were just guesses, wishes, hopes that somewhere, someone held the key to his name. The case got listed as Profile of the Month on a website called Missing from the Circle. This site focused on missing Native Americans. Maybe Lyle had tribal connections they missed. Maybe someone from a different tribe would know him. But again, nothing came back. Every few months, someone would claim they knew who he was. A mother would call saying this was her missing son. A sister would email with an old photograph. Every single time, the police checked. Every single time, it led nowhere. The pain of those families was real. Their missing loved ones were real. But they were not Lyle Stevick. The mystery deepened as time passed. How does someone live 25 years in America and leave no trace? No school records, no medical records, no employment history, no friends who reported him missing, no family searching for him. It seemed impossible. But the evidence was clear. Lyle Stevick existed only in that motel room for a few days in September 2001. Before that, he was nobody. After that, he was a body in a morgue with no name on the tag. Then, in 2018, 17 years after his death, something changed. A nonprofit group called the DNA Doe Project reached out to the sheriff's office. They specialized in using new technology to identify unknown bodies. Genetic genealogy, they called it. The same science people use to find out where their ancestors came from. The same websites where you could spit in a tube and learn you were 12% Irish or 8% Native American. The DNA Doe Project said they could help. They could take Lyle's DNA and upload it to public genealogy databases. They could find his distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, people who shared his great-great-great-grandparents. Then they could build a family tree forward through time until they found him. It would take money. It would take time. It would take hundreds of hours of volunteer work. The sheriff's office agreed. Within 24 hours, people from around the world donated enough money to fund the entire project. 900,000 people had uploaded their DNA to a website called GED Match. Somewhere in that ocean of data, Lyle's relatives were waiting. On March 22, 2018, Dr. Weining Tang at AMD Biotech uploaded Lyle's genetic profile to GED Match. 20 volunteers from the DNA Doe Project started searching. They worked night and day. They traced family lines through birth records and death certificates, through marriage licenses and census data, through phone books and newspaper archives. They built trees that spread across generations like roots growing deep into American soil. And then they found something, a match. Not a close match, not a parent or sibling, but someone related. Someone whose ancestors and Lyle's ancestors crossed paths generations ago in northern New Mexico. The 20 volunteers worked like detectives from the future. They had names now, distant relatives who lived in New Mexico generations ago. They searched through old records, marriage licenses from the 1800s, birth certificates yellowed with age, death records written in fading ink. They traced each family line forward through time. Who married whom? Who had children? Where those children moved? What those children named their own babies? The trees grew bigger and more complex. Hundreds of names, thousands of connections, every branch splitting into more branches, every generation spreading wider across the map of America. The work took hundreds of hours. One person would trace a line until it dead-ended. Another would pick up a different branch and follow it. Back and forth. Up and down through time, checking and double-checking every detail. Margaret Press worked as a co-founder of the DNA Doe Project. She talked to a newspaper called The New Mexican. She told them, "We are pretty confident that some of his ancestors 2 or 3 generations back, were located in northern New Mexico. Her voice sounded tired but excited. After 17 years, they were finally getting close. The family tree pointed west, to California. The volunteers found a possible match, a man who would be about 25 years old in 2001, a man whose family came from northern New Mexico generations earlier, a man who fit the age and description. They sent the information to the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office, May 8, 2018. The sheriff's office made a phone call. They reached out to a family in California. They explained who they were and why they were calling. They described a young man who died 17 years ago in a motel in Washington State. They said they believed this young man was related to this family. They asked if anyone was missing. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched on forever. Then someone spoke. Shock filled their voice. Confusion. They were not missing anyone. Everyone was accounted for. Everyone was fine. They had not seen this person since 1976. That would make him about 10 or 11 years old the last time they saw him. They thought he had simply stopped talking to the family. People drift apart. People lose touch. That is what they believed for all these years. But the police kept talking. They had fingerprints from the body. Did the family have any childhood fingerprints? Many schools in the 1970s and 80s took fingerprints of students as part of safety programs, in case a child ever went missing, in case a child was ever kidnapped, just in case. The family searched through old boxes and files. They found what they were looking for. Small fingerprint cards from an elementary school program. Black ink pressed onto white paper decades ago. The fingerprints of a child who was now dead. They sent the cards to the sheriff's office. A detective laid the childhood prints next to the prints taken from the body in 2001. The loops and whorls matched perfectly, ridge for ridge, pattern for pattern. The same unique design that nobody else in the world shares. The match was positive, 100% certain. The Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office made an announcement. After 17 years, Lyle Stevick had been identified. He was a 25-year-old man from California. His family had been notified. The case was solved. But the announcement came with a request. The family asked that his real name not be made public. They wanted privacy. They wanted to grieve alone. The sheriff's office agreed. To this day, Lyle Stevick's true identity remains known only to his family and a handful of investigators. The internet exploded with the news. Reddit threads filled with thousands of comments. People who had spent years researching the case celebrated and mourned at the same time. They were happy he had been identified, happy his family finally knew what happened, but they were also heartbroken. The mystery that brought them together was over. The details of his death felt even more disturbing now. This was not a drifter. This was not a homeless man. This was someone with a family, someone with a history, someone who had a name that people knew. Yet he walked away from all of it. He disappeared so completely that even his own family thought he was still alive somewhere. Just estranged. Just choosing not to keep in touch. Think about what that means. For 25 years, he lived somewhere in America. He moved from place to place. He had a life of some kind. Maybe he worked jobs under fake names. Maybe he stayed in shelters. Maybe he slept in parks. Maybe he hitchhiked from town to town. All that time, his family believed he was out there, choosing not to contact them. The weight loss made more sense now. 40 pounds lost through bulimia, the injuries on his hands from forcing himself to throw up. That kind of damage comes from deep pain, from hating yourself, from wanting to disappear, not just from the world, but from your own body. The appendix surgery happened about a year before he died. That means he went to a hospital somewhere. He must have used a fake name. He must have paid cash or used fake insurance. Otherwise, there would be records. Otherwise, someone would have reported his real name. The book detail became even stranger. Joyce Carol Oates wrote You Must Remember This in 1987. The character Lyle Stevick tries to kill himself in that novel. The real man who took that name was born around 1976. He would have been 11 years old when the book came out. Maybe he read it as a teenager. Maybe that character spoke to him somehow. Maybe he planned for years to die using that name. The pillows jammed against the walls took on new meaning. He knew his body would fight. He knew he would thrash and struggle. Maybe he did not want anyone in the next room to hear. Maybe he did not want to scare anyone. Even in death, even while erasing himself, he showed consideration for others. The $160 left for the room. The note saying, "For the room." An apology for the trouble, for the mess, for dying there. The word suicide written on paper and thrown in the trash. Maybe he wrote a longer letter to his family. Maybe he told them not to look for him. Maybe he explained why he needed to disappear. Then maybe he tore it up and kept only that one word: suicide. So police would know it was not murder. So they would not waste time looking for a killer. Even that was thoughtful in its own terrible way. The timing haunted everyone. September 14th, 2001. 3 days after the Twin Towers fell. The whole country was in shock. People were scared and sad and angry. Maybe that added to his pain. Maybe he felt even more alone watching the world break apart on television. Or maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe he had planned this for months or years, and the timing just happened to fall then. Amanda Park was 600 miles from anywhere, remote, isolated, dark trees and rain and fog, the perfect place to vanish. He could have died anywhere, in a city, in his hometown. But he chose the most lonely place he could find, a motel on the edge of the world where nobody knew him and nobody would ask questions. The case file shows he checked into room 5 first, then complained about noise and moved to a different room. But reports suggest he ended up back in room 5 anyway. Some accounts are unclear about which room he ultimately died in. But the number 5 stuck in people's memories. The room where the ghost lived for 3 days before he stopped living at all. People who stayed at the Lake Quinault Inn after his death reported strange things. Feelings of being watched. Cold spots in certain rooms. The manager's daughter posted on Facebook years later about waking up in the middle of the night feeling someone staring at her. She had just had a baby and was staying at the inn. She said she would never stay there again. Maybe it was grief talking. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe something of Lyle remained in that place where he worked so hard to disappear. The DNA Doe Project called this one of their biggest successes. The case proved that genetic genealogy could solve the unsolvable. It inspired them to take on hundreds more cases. Other unknown bodies, other families waiting for answers. As of 2026, about 14,000 unidentified dead people remain in America. 14,000 families somewhere who might be missing someone and not know they are dead. But Lyle's case also proved something darker. It showed that in America, in the age of computers and databases and security cameras everywhere, a person can still disappear completely. You can live 25 years and leave no trace. No friends reporting you missing. No employer looking for you. No neighbor wondering where you went. You can become nobody, and you can die as nobody. And the only reason anyone will ever find out who you were is because 900,000 strangers put their DNA on the internet, hoping to learn about their ancestors. His family has never spoken publicly. They released no statement beyond asking for privacy. We do not know if they feel guilty. We do not know if they wondered over the years where he was. We do not know if they looked for him. We do not know if they mourned him. All we know is they thought he was alive. They thought he chose to stay away. And then one day the police called and told them he had been dead for 17 years. The most terrifying thing about this case is not how he died. It is how he lived. 25 years walking through America like a ghost. Working somehow, eating somehow, sleeping somewhere. Existing in the spaces between normal life. Never leaving a footprint deep enough for anyone to notice. That takes planning. That takes will. That takes a level of pain most people cannot imagine. The sheriff's office closed the case in May 2018. They stamped the file with the word "solved" and put it in permanent storage. The body had been cremated years earlier. There was no grave to visit, no headstone with his real name, just ashes scattered somewhere or stored in an unmarked container. The family was notified. They were given the details. What happened next between them and their grief belongs to them alone. Namus removed his entry from their database. The National Missing and Unidentified Person System tracks thousands of cases across America. Lyle Stevick's case number went dark. The photographs came down. The physical description disappeared. In the official record, he no longer existed as an unknown. He existed as someone identified but unnamed to the public. A strange kind of half-existence. Known and unknown at the same time. The DNA Doe Project added Lyle to their list of successes. Their website shows case after case. Grateful Doe, Buckskin Girl, Princess Doe. Each one a person who died without a name and was later identified through genetic genealogy. Lyle Stevick became proof that the method worked. That volunteer investigators could solve cases that police departments could not. His identification opened doors for hundreds of other families still waiting for answers. The science behind it changed everything. Genetic genealogy combines DNA testing with old-fashioned genealogy research. Someone uploads the DNA of an unknown person to a public database like GED Match. The computer searches through hundreds of thousands or even millions of other DNA samples looking for matches. Not exact matches, distant matches, people who share a common ancestor 5 or 6 or 7 generations back. When a match appears, researchers build family trees. They use census records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries, and newspaper archives. They trace every branch forward through time. They follow children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They map out where people moved, who they married, what they named their babies. Eventually, the trees point to a specific person, someone who fits the age and description, someone who went missing or stopped talking to their family, someone who might be the unknown body. The process takes hundreds of hours, sometimes thousands. Volunteers work for free because they care, because they believe every person deserves a name, because they understand that somewhere a family might be waiting without knowing they are waiting. Lyle's case inspired change beyond just solving mysteries. It showed that the digital age has not made it impossible to disappear, but it has made it much harder to stay disappeared after death. Your DNA connects you to relatives you might never have met, to ancestors who died before you were born. That genetic thread can pull you back from oblivion even after 17 years. But the case also showed the limits of identification. Knowing someone's name does not mean knowing their story. We know Lyle Stevick's real name now. His family knows. The police know. But the public does not. And without that name, we cannot know what happened in those 25 years. We cannot search for his childhood friends. We cannot find his school records. We cannot interview people who knew him. The mystery of his identity is solved, but the mystery of his life remains sealed. Lane Humans finally got his answer. The coroner who could not let the case go, who posted on web sleuths asking for help, who believed this case was different from all the others. After 17 years, he learned the truth. We do not know if it gave him peace. We do not know if it haunted him more, knowing the man had family who thought he was alive. But at least he knew. At least the question had an answer. The Lake Quinault Inn still operates today. Travelers still stop there on their way up or down Highway 101. The building looks much the same as it did in 2001. The rooms still have the same layout. The coat racks are probably still there. Aunt Barb retired years ago. The new manager has her own stories, her own strange encounters. People ask about Room 5 sometimes. Ghost hunters, true crime fans, people who read about the case online and want to see where it happened. The inn does not advertise the connection. They do not want to become a dark tourism destination. But locals know. The story gets passed around. The man who was nobody. The ghost in Room 5. Some people in Amanda Park say they feel watched when they walk past the inn at night. Some say they see a figure in the window of a certain room. Tall and thin, just standing there. Maybe it is shadows. Maybe it is imagination. Maybe it is the way our brains try to make sense of tragedy by turning it into something supernatural. Or maybe something of Lyle does remain there. Not his body, not his soul, but the weight of his absence, the shape of the hole he left. What we still do not know could fill books. Where did he go after 1976? That is 25 years unaccounted for, a quarter of a century. Did he live on the streets? Did he work under fake names? Did he travel? Did he have friends who knew him by a different identity? Did anyone love him during those years? Did he love anyone back? Why did he stop talking to his family? What happened when he was 10 or 11 years old that made him walk away and never come back? Was it abuse, neglect, mental illness, a choice he made that he could not take back? We will probably never know. His family has not spoken. They may never speak. That is their right. The Canadian accent, Aunt Barb, remembered might mean he spent time in Canada, or it might mean nothing. Memories change over 17 years. Details get fuzzy. Maybe she heard what she expected to hear from a stranger passing through. The letter he might have written haunts the imagination. That word suicide torn from a longer message. Did he tell his family he loved them? Did he explain his pain? Did he ask them not to feel guilty, or did he blame them for something? We only have that one word. The rest is smoke. Why September 14th specifically? Why 2001? Why 3 days after the towers fell? Was he already planning to die, and the attacks just happened to coincide? Or did watching the world burn push him over an edge he had been standing on for years? These questions have no answers. The money left behind tells us he had some. $160 in 20s. That is not rich, but it is not broke either. He could afford the room. He could afford to stay longer if he wanted. Money was not the reason he died, at least not directly. Other cases echo Lyle's story. Mary Anderson died in a Seattle hotel in 1996. She used a fake name. She had no identification. She took her own life. Despite DNA and fingerprints and photographs, she remains unidentified as of 2026. 30 years and counting. Maybe she has family who think she is alive. Maybe she erased herself just as completely as Lyle tried to. Benjamin Kyle was found behind a Burger King in Georgia in 2004. He had total amnesia, could not remember his name or where he came from. It took 11 years to identify him. 11 years of being nobody, living as a blank slate. His case was different because he wanted to know who he was. But the result was the same. A person without a past, without a name, without proof they ever existed. Grateful Doe died in a car accident in 1995. He had no identification. He was 19 or 20 years old. It took 20 years to identify him as Jason Callahan. His mother had been looking for him the whole time. She never stopped believing he would come home. When she finally learned the truth, her son had been dead for 2 decades. 14,000 unidentified bodies remain in America today. 14,000 people who died, and nobody knows their names. Some are murder victims. Some are accident victims. Some are suicides. Some are natural deaths of homeless people with no identification. Each one has a story. Each one has a family somewhere, whether that family knows they are missing or not. The digital age should have made this impossible. We have cameras everywhere, facial recognition, DNA databases, fingerprint systems, social media accounts, credit card records, phone location data. The web of surveillance grows tighter every year. Yet people still slip through. They still disappear. They still die alone and nameless. Lyle Stevick proved you can live in America for 25 years and leave no mark. No school transcript, no employment record, no medical history, no arrest record, no nothing. You can be 25 years old and as invisible as a ghost. The only way they found him was because 900,000 people uploaded their DNA to a genealogy website. Without that website, without those strangers, Lyle would still be nameless today. He would be forgotten. Another cold case file gathering dust in a sheriff's office in Washington state. His family has to live with knowing he was out there all those years, alive but gone, living but lost. Did they look for him? Did they call his name? Did they check homeless shelters? Did they post missing person reports? We do not know. Maybe they did everything they could. Maybe they assumed he wanted space. Maybe they respected what they thought was his choice to stay away. And then the police called and told them he had been dead since 2001. The question that stays with everyone who learns this story is simple and impossible. What makes a person want to erase themselves so completely? What pain runs so deep that death seems easier than calling home? What happened in those lost 25 years that made a motel room in the middle of nowhere feel like the right place to end? We want answers. We want to understand. We want it to make sense. But some things do not make sense. Some pain is too private, too personal, too deep to explain. Some people carry weight we cannot see. They smile and function and move through the world while dying inside. And sometimes they finally stop fighting. Lyle Stevick's real name is locked away. His family guards it. The police respect their wishes. To the world, he remains Lyle Stevick, a character from a book, a fake name on a motel registration card, a ghost who existed for 3 days in September 2001 and then stopped existing at all. But somewhere in California, people knew him by another name. They knew him as a child. They knew him as a son, or brother, or cousin, or nephew. They have memories of him laughing, playing, growing, learning. They have photographs of a boy who would become the man in room 5. Those photographs probably sit in boxes or albums. That boy smiles at the camera, not knowing what comes next, not knowing he will spend his entire adult life running from that smile, from that name, from that identity. And somewhere in those same boxes might be fingerprint cards from an elementary school safety program, black ink on white paper, the swirls and loops that would eventually solve a mystery 17 years after his death, the proof that he existed, that he was real, that he was someone before he became no one. How many other Lyle Stevicks walk among us right now? How many people have erased themselves and are living under fake names, waiting for their own moment in a motel room somewhere? How many families believe their missing members are alive when they have been dead for years? How many bodies lie in morgues, without names, waiting for the science to catch up, for the databases to grow large enough, for the volunteers to put in the hours to trace one more family tree? The answer is we do not know. We cannot know. The disappeared stay disappeared until something makes them visible again. Sometimes that something is luck. Sometimes it is technology. Sometimes it is the kindness of strangers who care about the dead. And sometimes they never come back at all. They stay lost forever. Names that nobody remembers. Faces that nobody claims. Stories that end without anyone knowing they ended. Lyle Stevick got his name back, but he lost everything else. His story, his reasons, his truth. And in the end, maybe that is what he wanted. To be known, but not known. To exist, but not exist. To have a name that nobody can say out loud. The mystery is solved. But the questions remain. And they will remain as long as people remember the man in room 5 who came from nowhere and returned to nothing, leaving behind only 2 words that haunt everyone who reads them: for the room.